Marcus Vitruvius Pollio, commonly known as Vitruvius, was a Roman author, architect, civil engineer and military engineer during the 1st century BC. Known for his multi-volume work entitled De Architectura. By his own description, Vitruvius served as an artilleryman, the third class of arms in the military offices. He probably served as a senior officer of artillery in charge of doctores, ballistarum and liberators who actually operated the machines. Life and career. Little is known about Vitruvius' life. Most inferences about him are extracted from his only surviving work De Architectura. His first name Marcus and his cognomen Pollio are uncertain. He was possibly a praefectus fabram during military service or praefect architectus armamentarius of the apparatus status group. Caesius Faventinus speaks of Vitruvius Pollio ali quaugtores in his Epitome. It is possible that the cognomen derives from this mention by Caesius, meaning Vitruvius, Pollio, and others, further confusing the cognomen. An inscription in Verona names Lucius Vitruvius Corda, and an inscription from Thilbillus, North Africa, names Marcus Vitruvius Mamura. From this inscription, the archaeologist Drive, G.Q. Giglioli nearly concludes that Vitruvius and Mamura are from the same family. His argument is presented by Ettore Pais. That name is very common in Formorian regions adjacent, as well. Dr. Giglioli observes, it is rare elsewhere. Indeed, so far, except for some historical figures, that, as the writer Vitruvius and Vacca, formerly belonged to or who are assigned to it, this name is not natively found in Numidia, and only in a epigraph of this region. Dr. Giglioli has recovered the memory of a member of the family Mamura Vitruvius, and deduces he is of the same family as the well-known writer from Formia. The Roman military officer Mamura also served as praefectus fabrum in Hispania, Gaul and Pontus under Julius Caesar. Paul Thielsch moved the conclusions of Dr. Giglioli further and concluded that these two men are the same. There are inconsistencies with this conclusion, such as there is no mention of Caesar's invasions of Britain in De Architectura, nor of other things with which Mamura was associated, such as equestrian military practices, and a love for nepotism and personal wealth. Additionally, Caesar received a letter that can be inferred to have news of Mamura's death, whereas Vitruvius dedicated De Architectura to the Emperor Augustus. He appears to be known to Pliny the Elder through his description of constructing mosaics in the Naturalis Historia. Although he is not actually named in that passage, he does appear in Naturalis Historia 1. Frontinus refers to Vitruvius the architect in his late 1st century work De Aqua Educatu. Likely born a free Roman citizen, by his own account, Vitruvius served the Roman army under Caesar with the otherwise poorly identified Marcus Aurelius, Publius Minidius, and Gnaeus Cornelius. These names vary depending on the edition of De Architectura. Publius Minidius is also written as Publius Numidicus and Publius Numidus, speculated as the same Publius Numicius inscribed on the Roman theatre at Heraclea. As an army engineer, he specialized in the construction of ballista and Scorpio artillery war machines for sieges. It is speculated that Vitruvius served with Caesar's chief engineer Lucius Cornelius Balbus. The locations where he served can be reconstructed from, for example, descriptions of the building methods of various foreign tribes. Although he describes places throughout De Architectura, he does not say he was present. His service likely included North Africa, Hispania, Gaul and Pontus. To place the role of Vitruvius the military engineer in context, a description of the prefect of the camp or army engineer is quoted here as given by Flavius Vegetius Renatus in the military institutions of the Romans. The prefect of the camp, though inferior in rank to the prefect, had a post of no small importance. The position of the camp, the direction of the entrenchments, The inspection of the tents or huts of the soldiers and the baggage were comprehended in his province. His authority extended over the sick, and the physicians who had the care of them, and he regulated the expenses relative thereto. He had the charge of providing carriages, bathhouses and the proper tools for sawing and cutting wood, digging trenches, raising parapets, sinking wells and bringing water into the camp. He likewise had the care of furnishing the troops with wood and straw, as well as the rams, onagra, ballistae and all the other engines of war under his direction. This post was always conferred on an officer of great skill, experience and long service, and who consequently was capable of instructing others in those branches of the profession in which he had distinguished himself. At various locations described by Vitruvius, battles and sieges occurred. He is the only source for the siege of Larignum in 56 BC. Of the battlegrounds of the Gallic War there are references to the siege and massacre of the 40,000 residents at Avaricum in 52 BC. Vercingetorix commented that the Romans did not conquer by valor nor in the field, but by a kind of art and skill in assault, with which they, Gauls, themselves were unacquainted. The broken siege at Gergovia in 52 BC, the circumvallation and battle of Alesia in 52 BC, the women and children of the encircled city were evicted to conserve food, where they starved to death between the opposing walls of the defenders and besiegers, and the siege of Uxellodunum in 51 BC. These are all sieges of large Gallic oppida. Of the sites involved in Caesar's civil war, we find the siege of Massilia in 49 BC, the Battle of Dyrrhachium of 48 BC, the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BC, the Battle of Zela of 47 BC and the Battle of Thapsus in 46 BC in Caesar's African campaign. A legion that fits the same sequence of locations is the Legio Sixferata, of which ballista would be an auxiliary unit. Mainly known for his writings, Vitruvius was himself an architect. In Roman times architecture was a broader subject than at present, including the modern fields of architecture, construction management, construction engineering, chemical engineering, civil engineering, materials engineering, mechanical engineering, military engineering and urban planning. Architectural engineers consider him the first of their discipline, a specialization previously known as technical architecture. Frontinus mentions him in connection with the standard sizes of pipes. He is often credited as father of architectural acoustics for describing the technique of ecchia's placement in theatres. The only building, however, that we know Vitruvius to have worked on is one he tells us about, a basilica completed in 19 BC. It was built at Fanum Fortrina, now the modern town of Fano. The Basilica di Fano has disappeared so completely that its very site is a matter of conjecture, although various attempts have been made to visualize it. The early Christian practice of converting Roman basilicae into cathedrals implies the basilica may be incorporated into the cathedral located in Fano. In later years the Emperor Augustus, through his sister Octavia Minor, sponsored Vitruvius, entitling him with what may have been a pension to guarantee financial independence. Whether her Architectura was written by one author or as a compilation completed by subsequent librarians and copyists remains an open question. The date of his death is unknown, which suggests that he had enjoyed only little popularity during his lifetime. Gerolamo Cardano, in his 16th book De Subtilitate Rerum, ranks Vitruvius as one of the 12 persons whom he supposes to have excelled all men in the force of genius and invention, and would not have scrupled to have given him the first place, if it could be imagined that he had delivered nothing but his own discoveries. Vitruvius de Architectura Libri Decem. Vitruvius is the author of De Architectura, known today as the 10 Books on Architecture, a treatise written in Latin on architecture, dedicated to the Emperor Augustus. In the preface of Book 1, Vitruvius dedicates his writings so as to give personal knowledge of the quality of buildings to the emperor. Likely Vitruvius is referring to Marcus Agrippa's campaign of public repairs and improvements. This work is the only surviving major book on architecture from classical antiquity. According to Petri Liukanen, this text influenced deeply from the early Renaissance onwards artists, thinkers, and architects. Among them Leon Battista Alberti, Leonardo da Vinci, and Michelangelo. The next major book on architecture, Alberti's reformulation of 10 books, was not written until 1452. Vitruvius is famous for asserting in his book De Architectura that a structure must exhibit the three qualities of firmitas, utilitas, venestis, that is, it must be solid, useful, beautiful. These are sometimes termed the Vitruvian Virtues or the Vitruvian Triad. According to Vitruvius, architecture is an imitation of nature. As birds and bees built their nests, so humans constructed housing from natural materials that gave them shelter against the elements. When perfecting this art of building, the Greeks invented the architectural orders, Doric, Ionic and Corinthian. It gave them a sense of proportion, culminating in understanding the proportions of the greatest work of art, the human body. This led Vitruvius in defining his Vitruvian man, as drawn later by Leonardo da Vinci, the human body inscribed in the circle and the square. Vitruvius is sometimes loosely referred to as the first architect, but it is more accurate to describe him as the first Roman architect to have written surviving records of his field. He himself cites older but less complete works. He was less an original thinker or creative intellect than a codifier of existing architectural practice. It should also be noted that Vitruvius had a much wider scope than modern architects. Roman architects practiced a wide variety of disciplines. In modern terms, they could be described as being engineers, architects, landscape architects, artists, and craftsmen combined. Etymologically, the word architect derives from Greek words meaning master and builder. The first of the 10 books deals with many subjects which now come within the scope of landscape architecture. Roman technology. Books 8, I, X and X form the basis of much of what we know about Roman technology, now augmented by archaeological studies of extant remains, such as the water mills at Barbgal in France. The other major source of information is the Naturalis Historia compiled by Pliny the Elder much later in c. 75 AD. Machines. The work is important for its descriptions of the many different machines used for engineering structures such as hoists, cranes and pulleys, as well as war machines such as catapults, ballista, and siege engines. As a practicing engineer, Vitruvius must be speaking from personal experience rather than simply describing the works of others. He also describes the construction of sundials and water clocks, and the use of an Aeoli pile as an experiment to demonstrate the nature of atmospheric air movements. Aqueducts. His description of aqueduct construction includes the way they are surveyed, and the careful choice of materials needed. Although Frontinus, writing a century later, gives much more detail of the practical problems involved in the construction and maintenance, surely Vitruvius' book would have been of great assistance in this. Vitruvius was writing in the 1st century BC when many of the finest Roman aqueducts were built, and survive to this day, such as those at Segovia and the Pont du Gard. The use of the inverted siphon is described in detail, together with the problems of high pressures developed in the pipe at the base of the siphon, a practical problem with which he seems to be acquainted. Materials. He describes many different construction materials used for a wide variety of different structures, as well as such details as stucco painting. Concrete and lime receive in-depth descriptions. The longevity of many Roman structures being mute testimony to the Romans' skill in building materials and design. Vitruvius is well known and often cited as one of the earliest surviving sources to have advised that leads should not be used to conduct drinking water, recommending clay pipes or masonry channels. He comes to this conclusion in Book 8 of De Architectura after empirical observation of the apparent labor illnesses in the lead foundries of his time. Vitruvius gives us the famous story about Archimedes and his detection of adulterated gold in a royal crown. When Archimedes realized that the volume of the crown could be measured exactly by the displacement created in a bath of water, he ran into the street with the cry of Eureka, and the discovery enabled him to compare the density of the crown with pure gold. He showed that the crown had been alloyed with silver, and the king defrauded. Dewatering machines. He describes the construction of Archimedes' screw in Chapter 10. It was a device widely used for raising water to irrigate fields and drain mines. Other lifting machines he mentions include the endless chain of buckets and the reverse overshot water wheel. Remains of the water wheels used for lifting water were discovered when old mines were reopened at Rio Tinto in Spain, Rosia Montana in Romania, and Do Lorcothi in West Wales. The Rio Tinto wheel is now shown in the British Museum, and the Do Lorcothi specimen in the National Museum of Wales. Surveying instruments. That he must have been well practiced in surveying is shown by his descriptions of surveying instruments, especially the water level or chorobates, which he compares favorably with the groma, a device using plumb lines. They were essential in all building operations, but especially in aqueduct construction, where a uniform gradient was important to the provision of a regular supply of water without damage to the walls of the channel. He also developed one of the first odometers, consisting of a wheel of known circumference that dropped a pebble into a container on every rotation. Central heating. He describes the many innovations made in building design to improve the living conditions of the inhabitants. Foremost among them is the development of the hypocaust, a type of central heating where hot air developed by a fire was channeled under the floor and inside the walls of public baths and villas. He gives explicit instructions how to design such buildings so that fuel efficiency is maximized, so that, for example, the caldarium is next to the tepidarium followed by the frigidarium. He also advises on using a type of regulator to control the heat in the hot rooms. A bronze disc set into the roof under a circular aperture which could be raised or lowered by a pulley to adjust the ventilation. Although he does not suggest it himself, it is likely that his dewatering devices such as the reverse overshot water wheel was used in the larger baths to lift water to header tanks at the top of the larger thermae, such as the baths of Diocletian, the one which was used in Bath of Caracalla for grinding flour. Lists of names given in Book 7 Introduction. In Book 7's introduction, Vitruvius goes to great lengths to present why he is qualified to write De Architectura. This is the only location in the book where Vitruvius specifically addresses his personal breadth of knowledge. Similar to a modern reference section, the author's position as one who is knowledgeable and educated is established. The topics range across many fields of expertise, reflecting that in Roman times as today construction is a diverse field. Vitruvius is clearly a well-read man. In addition to providing his qualification, Vitruvius summarizes a recurring theme throughout the 10 books. A non-trivial and core contribution of his treatise outside simply a construction book. Vitruvius makes the point that the work of some of the most talented are unknown, while many who are of lesser talent but greater political position are famous. This theme runs through Vitruvius's 10 books repeatedly, echoing an implicit prediction that his works and himself will also be unknown, which was true for over 1,000 years after he completed the 10 books. Vitruvius illustrates this point by naming what he considers are the most talented individuals in history, implicitly challenging the reader in that they have never heard of some of these people. Vitruvius goes on and predicts that some of these individuals will be forgotten and their works will be lost, while other less deserving political characters of history will be forever remembered with pageantry. Again, a non-trivial claim when we remember that this is the builder of Julius Caesar's war machines and fortifications. The inclusion of this list is important to illustrate the truth of Vitruvius's claim and should not be removed. List of physicists: Thales, Democritus, Anaxagoras, Xenophanes. List of philosophers: Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Zeno, Epicurus. List of kings: Croesus, Alexander the Great, Darius. On plagiarism: Aristophanes, Ptolemy I, Soter, a person named Attalus. On abusing dead authors: Zoilus, Homomastics, Ptolemy II, Philadelphus. On divergence of the visual rays: Agatharchus, Aeschylus, Democritus, Anaxagoras. List of writers on temples: Silenus, Theodorus, Chersiphron and Metagenes, Ictinus and Carpion, Theodorus the Phocian, Hermogenes, Archesius, Satyrus and a person named Pythios. List of artists: Leo Ceres, Bryaxis, Scopar, Praxiteles, Timotheus. List of writers on laws of symmetry: Nexarus, Theocydes, a person named Demophilus, Pallas, a person named Leonidas, Silanion, Melempus, Sarnacus, Euphranor. List of writers on machinery: Diades of Pella, Archites, Archimedes, Ctesibius, Nymphodorus, Philo of Byzantium, Diphilus, Democles, Carius, Polyidus of Thessaly, Pyrrhus, Agesistratus, Abderaxus. List of writers on architecture: Fuficius, Terentius Varro, Publius Septimius. List of architects: Antistates, Calliarchus, Antimachides, Pormus, Cossutius. List of greatest temple architects: Chersiphron of Knossos, Metagenes, Demetrius, Paeonius the Milesian, Ephesian Daphnis, Ictinus, Philon, Cossutius, Gaius Muc.